and the Devil. This is directed by Lee Von Tay, and it is a 2019 crime thriller action movie. Now, there's a lot to talk about in this, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised by this one. This is a movie that follows the titular three characters, a gangster, a cop, and the devil, who is, in this case, a serial killer. So we have this serial killer who has a very particular MO. He rear-ends people in his car, and then when they get out, that's when he assaults them. We have the cop, who he's ambitious, a bit amoral, but also very intelligent. He's kind of the first one to figure out there's a serial killer on the loose, but nobody really wants to listen to him. There isn't enough evidence, and also there's a bit of corruption with his chief. So, he kind of, his investigation's stymied, and there's nothing he can really do about it, until one night, the serial killer happens to target the gangster. The gangster is he runs a lot of businesses in the city. He has like the gambling and the rackets and all of that, and he's a pretty respected guy. And one night he's driving away from his business and he gets attacked by the serial killer. They have a fight, and the gangster manages to survive. So the cop comes up with a bit of an unconventional idea. He goes to the gangster and proposes that they team up to get this serial killer, and that's where the movie really kicks off. So I really enjoyed this one. This was the real strength of the movie is kind of the contrast between the three characters. We have the gangster, the cop, and the serial killer, who are somewhat alike, somewhat similar, but also very different. They have different ways of looking at the world, different moral codes, and different approaches, and that I feel is really kind of what makes the movie interesting.
So let's first talk about the gangster. Now, this guy, his whole persona, his whole ideal is like he's a really no-nonsense type of dude. Very stoic, very strong, super powerful. Like one of the first scenes that we get to see him in, he's punching this punching bag. It looks like normal training until they open up the punching bag and you see there was this guy inside.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Kind of reminded me a little bit of Vito Corleone. Had a bit of that energy going on, a bit more brutal, but he had that presence, that bearing, bit of a Brando thing going on.
Exactly.
I thought he did a good job, because you see like a lot of people when they play like a crime lord, they do it in a sort of cliche way, but I thought he was very naturalistic. He's physically imposing, but he's also soft-spoken. It was a really interesting performance.
And what I really liked about this character is that normally when you see these types of characters where they kill and the gangsters and all that type of stuff, you're meant to hate them, but this guy has this type of, I guess, charisma about him that you really kind of root for him to catch the killer.
And yeah, he's not an entirely amoral man. We see that he does have a code. He is, he has his limitations, and he understands kind of where he fits into the world. He's not some mad dog kind of animal, although he does have to use force to keep people in line.
Yeah.
So then we have the cop, and the cop's an interesting character because in some ways he might be the most morally complex of the three we have here. He is a good man, he does want to stop the killer, he does have good intentions, but at the same time, he's self-interested, he has an ego, and he wants to get promoted. He's interested in his own professional ambitions. At a certain point in the film, the special task force comes in, and they're going to take over the murder investigation, and that's when his ego really kicks in. He's really determined to catch this guy before they do, and that's what leads him to making this deal with the gangster. And those two characters have really interesting dynamic too, where there's almost like a bit of a love-hate thing going on. You can tell they kind of respect each other, but at the end of the day, they're still on opposite sides, and they can't get too close, No,
exactly. And what something that they did in this movie that's interesting is when you see this serial killer, you get to see him killing people. When he targets the gangster, you see him trying to heal himself, not going to any hospital. So this guy is thinking all the time, and he does things in the movie where you're really wondering, is this guy self-destructive, or does this guy have a plan?
He's an interesting character because, we see him committing these murders, and he's very specific with his method, and he gets, once he realizes that there's people on his trail, he starts to get more brazen. And there's one particular scene where he's in a restaurant watching a report of the murders he committed, and he kind of lets slip a little bit that he might be responsible, and you can tell that someone in the restaurant overheard him, and you kind of get a sense that maybe, because, that's the thing you see with real-life serial killers, some of them kind of want to be caught. They like to tempt fate.
That's so true. And basically, as they go on through the movie, he does basically one of the ballsiest move by showing up to one of the guy's funeral and basically letting slip that, hey, this whole thing that's going on, that wasn't me. I'm just saying.
Well, because, like, we have this, like, even though the cop and the gangster team up, like, everybody kind of has their own agenda. Like, you know, the cop the cop, of course, plans to take the gangster down once this is all over. Like, his plan is basically not to only stop the serial killer, but also to arrest the gangster and possibly also to take down his boss, who's in league with the gangster. Like, his boss is on the gangster's payroll. But, you know, then you have, like, the gangster who's more, I don't know, I wouldn't say, like, morally straightforward. It's a complicated thing. It's kind of hard to pin down.
I would say that the way the serial killer looks at himself is that he completely believes in what he does.
Exactly.
He's completely accepted it, like the gangster. And that's where the cop lies in the middle of, like, even the title kind of puts it in.
Yeah, puts him, like, right in the middle, kind of as, you know, like, almost the anti-hero, the guy who dips into both sides. And, yeah, like, the whole conversation as to who is kind of morally correct, who has the moral high ground here. Does anybody even have a moral high ground? Does anybody have a right to judge anybody? That's, like, kind of one of the big questions going on here. Like, specifically between the gangster and the killer, like, what makes us different? But, you know, that is something that the film kind of goes out of its way to demonstrate as well. Like, you know, these guys are not the same. Again, the gangster has his own kind of code. Like, in some ways, he almost comes off as the most admirable character in the movie, even though he's a criminal. Like, he kind of has his own way of doing things, but, you know, like, he wants to see his own justice done. Like, he has a reason to disbelieve in the cops and to not believe in the system.
Yeah. And this guy is smart. Like, at first glance, you think that he's just a big guy who has muscles, so he intimidates people. But no, this guy knows how to play people properly. Like, there's a scene where him and the cop are talking about the deal, and he basically records them and says, like, okay, now we're both implicated.
Yeah.
So we're both going to catch this guy, you know?
And one thing I found interesting, supposedly this film is based on a true story, although I can't really find much evidence backing that up, and I would really like to know, like, what happened in real life and how much was changed, because this is a pretty insane story. Like, again, like, I even mentioned this, like, there are probably instances in real life of police and criminals kind of collaborating with each other. Like I mentioned in the case of Escobar, like, you know, you had these American agents who were collaborating basically with, like, drug dealers, and, you know, because a lot of Pablo Escobar's enemies were, you know, other, you know, basically rival cartel guys. They were drug dealers and murderers too, but, you know, the authorities had really no choice but to collaborate with these guys if they wanted to take Escobar down. So there's really, that's kind of a theme that's almost reflected in this film. You know, you have to team up with the lesser evil to take down a greater evil, and that puts everybody kind of on an interesting moral playing field where nobody can quite judge anybody else.
Exactly. And what I really liked about that point is that in the movie you did get to see all of them congregated into one place talking about their plans over, and there's dispute going right off the bat. Like, you know, one cop says, "Oh, you're gangsters to come."
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
other guy says, like, "Pay respects." It's like, Jesus, everybody needs to work together.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflict and fighting between the characters. It's very petty, but at the same time, it's probably true to life, you know, like, people, you have those opposing values, but there's also a lot of great scenes in the film, a lot of humor, a lot of personality. Like, we see little scenes of the gangsters and the cops kind of, you know, eating together and having conversations, and it's interesting stuff. The film is really well made, like, really great editing, really great pacing. There's great fight scenes, but, you know, like, it feels like it all flows together properly. Like, you know, you have scenes of the investigation that feel more like a typical police thriller, but then you have crazy fight scenes that feel like out of a martial arts movie. There's an amazing sequence towards the end of the film where the cops and the gangsters are all setting a trap for the killer, and everybody's lying in wait. And
if you love car chase scenes, this is it for you.
Yeah, some great car chases, great foot chases. Like, the movie really balances kind of the action and the character stuff very well, and makes for a good, well-rounded thriller. You know, you feel like you get to know these characters and you have a decent sense of who they are, but the movie never bores you.
Exactly.
You know, it's full of style, full of action.
This is basically a movie you should watch. So our final rating is...
I would give it a 4 out of 5.
I would also give it a 4 out of 5. This is an amazing movie. Honestly, it does have its flaw. No movie is perfect, but I beg you, watch this movie.
Yep, check it out.
Later.